Okay, even on a holiday, the professor is in. Talk about dedication. And this week, we are going to take a closer look at the national debt. No, don't change the channel. This is important because it comes amid growing concern that the GOP's big, beautiful bill could deepen America's debt crisis. Take a look at some of these recent headlines from the Boston Globe. Our national debt takes a ride into the stratosphere. In the Washington Post, Congress just pushed the U.S. toward a debt crisis. The Fed can't save us. Let's bring in the professor, Justin Wolfers, University of Michigan economics and public policy professor. Justin, working overtime, professor. First, thank you. Happy 4th. Good to have you here.
To you too. I'm just back from my small town parade, feeling full of freedom and independence, and remembering all of this actually started with a fight over taxes. So we're talking about the perfect thing, mate.
So help explain why we should all care about the national debt and just how bad is it right now?
Yeah, so let's just start by trying to get the size of the thing. Measurement matters. You'll sometimes hear people say that our national debt's $36 trillion. Actually, they're trying to alarm you. It's a little smaller. It's $29 trillion. The difference is in there, that $7 trillion is some amount of money that one part of the government owes another part. So it doesn't really make sense to count that. Now, we've talked before, it's always, numbers like trillions are really hard to make sense of. So let's compare it to something that matters, like how much income the country earns in a year. And it turns out our national debt is about 97% of gross domestic product. 100% is not a magic number. What that's telling you is our total national debt is roughly equal to the total amount of stuff that all Americans produce over the context of over 365 days. So that's how large it is. And you can see right here, when we measure it this way, we have had our debt this high before. Go all the way back and you'll see that after World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression, that our national debt did get this high in the past. So last time, it has been this high before, but last time it was this high, we worked pretty hard to start getting it down again. And what you're seeing here, Anna, is that national debt naturally rises when big bad things happen, right? During the World War, during the Civil War, during the COVID crisis, during the Great Recession. That's pretty natural. What's less natural is every other time we've been at a point like this, we work really hard to get it back down straight after, partly so we got money in the bank that we'll be able to rely on next time.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think that we're now at the same level as we were after World War II. What is the national debt then costing us? How do we repay it?
Yeah. So let's start by thinking about how big it is still, right? So we know it's 100% of GDP. In more personal terms, you could say that that's $85,000 per American. And that might sound terrifying to folks at home, but I want to remind everyone, America's a very rich country. We actually have the capacity to repay debts that large. It may not always feel like we're that rich, but we are. When economists think about this, increasingly we think, let's not compare it to let's not compare the total stock of debt. What really matters is, can we keep repaying the interest? Can we service the debt? Are we going to fall behind? And so we do the same thing that your family might do when thinking about a mortgage. We compare the annual mortgage costs, the annual interest costs, to our total income. And so when you do that, our interest payments relative to our country's income is about 3.5% of GDP. That is kind of high, but it kind of puts it in scale and says, you know what, we can afford this, so it's not tragic. But by the same token, by jingo, if I could find another 4% of my income to spend on other things instead of sending it off to the bank, that'd make me pretty happy too.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think a lot of people look at this and think if Congress can just keep passing legislation that adds to the debt, this is feeling a little bit like funny money. So why does it matter?
Yeah, so I'm going to do something a little surprising. I'm going to make the argument that maybe it doesn't matter as much as you think. And then because each economist has two hands, I'm going to come back and tell you maybe it does matter a lot. And we'll let the viewers decide. One of the things that's important to notice is that the national debt is actually largely money that we owe ourselves. One group of Americans, being the federal government, owes to another group of Americans, being the set of people who are willing to lend money to the government. So when you think about it that way, maybe it's not so problematic. Second thing, remember I just said that the national debt is $85,000 per person. That's suggesting that the 340 million Americans that exist right now are the only people who could repay it. But national debt's a bit different than household debt. We could pay half of it now and let the next generation repay the other half. And so if we spread this across 2 generations, instead of $85,000 per person, it's half that, $42,000. We could spread it across 10 generations. And so when you think about that, again, it starts to feel a little bit more sustainable. Let me try and put all of this in a bigger context, which is often politicians say getting rid of this debt is going to be almost impossible, too hard. It's because they lack political courage. But typically, the federal government spends about $25,000 per American per year. And so what that means for a viewer at home is they're going to spend about $1 million on you over the course of your lifetime. That's how much they're going to spend. So if they need to save $85,000 per person, it doesn't seem so hard now, does it? So the scale of the problem, if you think about it as something that we could pay off over a long period of time, starts to feel a lot better. There's something else that's different about the government. When you and I take out a mortgage, it's a 30-year mortgage. You've got to pay it off in 30 years. The government can keep rolling over its debt. So that's not to say we can borrow funny money forever. But what it is saying is we could stabilize our debt, how much we owe as a share of our income, for instance, and just keep borrowing and keep this game going for another decade and another century and so on. And so, again, it's a little bit more sustainable. And when we talk about being worried about this, I really do think the government has options that you and I don't. See, the problem for you and I is if our paycheck can't cover the monthly payments, there's nothing we can do, right? And that creates big financial problems for people. But the government can always just tax people more. And so the government has ways to raise more money, to raise more taxes, to pay down the debt.
Well, as always, we learned so much from you, Justin Wolfers. Thank you again for being here, for helping us understand some complicated stuff, but stuff we're always talking about, especially with this big bill that just passed in Congress. Good to have you here. Happy 4th.
Thanks, Anna.